Okay, so today we're going to kind of continue with what we talked about yesterday, but I kind of want to start over, so just see what I'm doing right here. So what we can do is we can comment a bunch of stuff out at the same time. So if you select code inside of that using math operators class that you're in, okay, for a Mac you got to hold down the command key, but for a PC, which is what you guys are on, you got to hold down the control key and then the key that you would use to put a single comment in, so the question mark key, okay? So if you do that, it'll comment that whole code out, all right? And if you do it again, it'll uncomment it, okay? So that's kind of a nice little feature of Eclipse. So I'm just going to comment out all the stuff that we did yesterday, okay? So that we can continue and we don't see the printouts that we saw yesterday. Okay, so let's get started with what we want to do today. So let's just say, for example, that we have a variable called students. How do you comment it? You hold down control and hit the question mark key or the slash key. Okay, so we're going to go int students, and let's see, I got about 27 students in here. Okay, so let's say that you guys go and tell your friends, like, oh man, Mr. Waz is an awesome teacher. You know, we're really learning a lot in that class, and you should switch out of your study hall so you can take computer science. Okay, so then let's say that we add 5 students onto this. Okay, so what we did yesterday is we said if we want to add 5 students onto students, then we're going to take students and make it equal to students plus 5. All right. So this is taking the value of students as it is right now, which is 27, adding 5 onto it, which is 32, and then putting that value back into students. So when the computer kind of figures out what you want to do, it sees an equal sign. It always figures out what's on the right of the equal sign before assigning it to whatever's on the left. All right. And what I want to do today is show you another way of doing that. So I'm going to comment that out. And I'm going to do instead students plus equals 5. Okay? So plus equals is what we call a compound operator. And so we have compound operators for plus equals, minus equals, times equals, divide equals, and mod equals. All right, and they all kind of make it like a shorthand way of doing what we did just here. Okay. They all replace an instruction like x equals x plus a with something like x plus equals a. Okay? So it's just another way that basically you can be a little bit lazier in programming. So we're saying here we want x to have a added onto it. All right. So we'll use that for simple things like adding a value to a variable. You want to come up? Okay. So then, hopefully that's making sense to you. That'll work for any type of operation that you want to do. So for example, if we wanted to say like we have a new int called, or let's do a double. Let's go double, I don't know, average equals, let's say 23.6, okay? And we want to say like, well, 23.6 isn't a very good average for whatever this is. let's go ahead and multiply that by 3. We could do average times equals 3, and that's multiplying average by 3, and we can check that by printing this thing out. Okay, so when we print that out, just get this so you can see it here. Okay, so when we print that out, we get 70.8 for whatever, 23.6 times 3 is 70.8. So we're giving average a new value there. All right, so the next thing that we want to do as far as math operators go is understand what's called an increment and decrement operator, okay? The word increment means to increase by 1, okay? The increment operator for Java is plus plus, okay? And so we're going to learn kind of a new little thing here, and that is that plus plus is what's known as a unary operator. Okay. In contrast, plus is a binary operator. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means if I tell you something like take 10 and add onto it, you would have a hard time giving me an answer to what that problem is. Okay? Because plus, again, is a binary operator. So what it needs is 2 operands that it can operate on. In other words, it needs 2 values that it can operate on. Okay? So, so 10 plus 5, so plus only works with 2, so binary, by 2, works with 2 operands, or in other words, values. Okay? Plus plus is different. Plus plus works with just 1 value, or 1 variable. Okay? So, for example, we can use plus plus if we have, again, let's say that we add more students. Okay, so up here we have students is equal to 27, then students plus equals 5. Let's say we get another student in here. Okay, so we have student plus plus. All right, and what that's going to do, I forgot the S in students there. Okay, so what that's going to do is this adds 1 to the variable students. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is just print out what students is. And then after I increment it, do a good job of typing here. I'm doing that really well here. Print out students again. Okay, so we're going to see this average is 70.6 or whatever it was. And then students, okay, if we're tracing through this code, students starts at 27. We're increasing it by 5 here. We should see 32 printed out. Then students plus plus, we should see 33 printed out. Okay, so there's my 32 and 33. Any questions about how plus plus works? Okay, so there is a kind of a peculiar thing about the increment operator, and that is that you can go plus plus students as well. Okay, so if I do plus plus students, it also increases the value of students, and if I print that out, okay, so I think we said it was 32, so this is 32, we increment it, now students is 33, we increment it again, now students is 34. Okay, so if I run that we should see 32, 33, 34 get printed out. And there it is. Okay, so then, all right, so then a good question might be, well, why are there two ways of doing it? What's the difference? Okay, so we're continuing to talk about the difference of the plus plus or the increment operator. What's the difference between incrementing after and incrementing before a variable here? Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to reset students. We're going to say that students is equal to 30, okay, because 34 was just too many students. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and say double total score here equals 2,400, so 2,400. And then what we want to do is figure out the average score. So that's going to be a double. Let's go double average score equals total score divided by students. All right. So let's go ahead and print out average score. Having a hard time typing here. And let's go ahead and print out how many students we have. Okay. So if I run this now, okay, so this is the number of students. 80 is the average because 2,400 divided by 30 is 80. Okay, and so what we're trying to do is build up our idea of what increment and decrement do. So let's go ahead and say, oh, you know what? We forgot a student. All right, we actually have 31 students. Okay, so let's increment this student just like that. All right. So I'm changing students inside the average score expression. So I'm doing students plus plus. Then let's go ahead and let's run this one more time. Okay, so now I got 31 for my number of students because students was incremented here, but I still got 80 for my average. Okay, well, that doesn't really seem right because 2,400 divided by 31 is not 80. So let's change this right here and make that total score divided by plus plus students or increment students and see if that changes our average. Okay, so now I get that there's still 31 students, but now my average is 77.4. Does that seem like that makes better sense as far as what the average should be? Okay, so now it's taking 2,400 here and dividing it by 31. Okay, so I don't know if this example is the greatest example that we could have had, but what we should be understanding here is that if you use increment inside of another expression, okay, if you put the increment before the variable, then it will increment it before it uses the variable. Okay, so we saw that when we did 2,400 divided by 31 and we got 77 point something. If we take the increment and we put it after the variable, then it will do this expression, it'll do this division with the current value of that variable, and then once it's done with the expression, it will increment the value. So in both of those examples, we saw that students was 31 when we were done. One time, it did the division first. One time, it did the increment first, and then did the division. Does that make sense? Okay, so if it doesn't make a lot of sense, don't worry about it too much, because like I said, I think it's bad programming, but I wanted to just show it to you so that you've seen it. Okay, so there's also a decrement operator, and if increment means increase by 1, then what do you think decrement means? Decrease by 1. And if plus plus is the increment operator, then what do you think the decrement operator is? Minus minus. Okay, and that thing operates the exact same way as the increment operator. So if you put it before the variable, it'll increment it before we use it. If you put it after, it'll increment it after we use it. Okay, I always will leave that as like its own line if we're going to use plus plus. Okay, and so now you have kind of 3 different ways that you could add one onto a variable. Okay, so if we could say something like students equals students plus 1, we could say students plus equals 1, or you could say students plus plus, or plus plus students. Okay, all of those lines of code add 1 onto the variable students.